The global economy, the one that delivers basically everything you buy, from your coffee maker to the parts in your phone, it all runs in the sea. We're talking about an industry that is, it's literally the backbone of all international trade.
And that entire just colossal system, it rests on the shoulders of the global seafarer workforce. We're talking about a population of nearly 2 million people who are, often out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
And making sure they have decent working conditions is, well, it's arguably one of the biggest logistical and legal challenges out there.
And that challenge, that's what led the International Labor Organization, the ILO, to create this revolutionary document. The Maritime Labor Convention of 2006, the MLC 2006.
It's massive. People in the industry often call it the fourth pillar of the international rulebook for shipping.
Alongside things like safety and environmental rules.
Exactly. It basically took this huge stack of old, often ignored rules and just rolled them into one powerful, enforceable, global document. And its mission was simple, but really profound: securing the fundamental right of all seafarers to decent employment.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to get into one specific crucial piece of that. The seafarer's right to adequate rest, and critically, their right to be paid for every single hour of overtime they work.
Because that's where the trouble starts.
Yeah, because as we're about to see, the legal right on paper is crystal clear. But the practical reality, what actually happens out on the water, that tells a very different and much more concerning story.
A very different story.
So let's start by looking back, before 2006. Why was a massive consolidated treaty like the MLC even necessary in the first place?
Well, it was necessary because the situation was chaotic, to put it mildly. Before the MLC, labor protections for seafarers were just notoriously fragmented.
What does that mean in practice?
It means if you had a vessel crewed by, say, 15 different nationalities sailing under a flag of convenience, you were dealing with this tangled patchwork of different national laws, old international conventions that nobody was really enforcing.
So if you have a crew member from the Philippines working for a Greek owner on a Panamanian flagged ship, whose rules even apply?
Exactly, that was the question. And that ambiguity led directly to precarious employment, completely unregulated working hours, and often, just substandard pay.
Right.
Seafarers, especially from developing nations, often felt like they just had to accept whatever conditions were offered. The MLC was designed to cut right through that, set a universal, non-negotiable benchmark.
A floor that no one could go below, no matter the flag or nationality.
That's the idea. And the most immediate focus of that benchmark was fatigue, because working people to the bone doesn't just hurt their wallet, it's incredibly dangerous.
So what were the hard limits? What does Regulation 2.3 actually say about work and rest?
It's very strict, very explicit. To mitigate fatigue, a seafarer cannot be required to work more than 14 hours in any 24-hour period.
And there's a weekly limit too, right?
Yeah, and they absolutely cannot work more than 72 hours in any 7-day period.
Okay, so that's the ceiling for work. What about the floor for rest?
Right, so for rest, they must have a minimum of 10 hours of rest in any 24-hour period. Or, looking at it weekly, 77 hours of rest in any 7-day period. These aren't suggestions.
No, they're the law.
They are the explicit legal baseline designed to keep everyone safe.
And this is where the right to overtime pay really gets formalized, isn't it? If they work beyond their standard contracted hours, say, their contract is for a 40-hour week, but they end up working 55 days. The MLC ensures they have to be paid for that extra time.
Precisely, as long as they don't breach those safety limits we just talked about. And the key document here is the Seafarers Employment Agreement, the SEA.
Their contract.
Yep. The SEA has to clearly specify either the total wages or a completely transparent formula for calculating pay, including the rate for overtime.
So it doesn't say it has to be time and a half or double time.
No, it doesn't mandate a specific rate. It gives some flexibility there, but it absolutely mandates transparency and documentation. It's the mechanism that's supposed to stop unpaid labor.
So we have the rule book, the work limits, the contract requirements. Now, the big question, how do you enforce this across the entire globe in an industry where ships are always on the move?
It relies on this three-pronged, multi-layered governance model.
Okay, let's break those 3 prongs down.
So first you have the flag states. They're the primary regulators.
So if a ship flies the Liberian flag, Liberia is on the hook.
Liberia is on the hook. They're responsible for passing their own national laws to enforce the MLC, for issuing the maritime labor certificates, and for making sure that ship is inspected regularly.
Okay, that's prong 1. What's number 2?
Number 2 is the ship owners. the companies that actually operate the vessel. Their obligation is operational. They have to stick to the wage agreements. And crucially, they have to accurately record all hours of work and rest for every single crew member.
So the paperwork.
The paperwork, that record keeping is their first line of accountability.
And the third prong, the safety net.
The third prong, which is the international safety net, is port state control, or PSC. This is absolutely vital.
Why is it so important?
Because if a ship is flagged in a country that's known for, let's say, poor oversight, PSC allows any other signatory state, like the US or the Netherlands, to inspect that foreign vessel when it docks at their port.
So a Panamanian flagged ship pulls into Rotterdam and the Dutch inspectors can just board it.
Exactly. They can board it and demand to see the records.
The logbooks.
Those logbooks, yes. They are the critical backstop, especially with all the flags of convenience out there. When a PSC inspector boards, what's the first thing they check? The records of hours of work and rest. The integrity of that paperwork is paramount. It's really the only way a regulator can verify compliance.
It sounds like an airtight system on paper. I mean, if the records are accurate, the seafarer gets paid for their overtime and safety is maintained. But now, let's get into the reality of how this all works under real commercial pressure.
This is where we see this profound, just massive gap between the law and what actually happens. Despite how clear the rules are, 14 hours max work, 10 hours min rest, we see these huge implementation problems.
And it all centers on the records.
It centers almost entirely on the systemic falsification of those very records.
Wait, hold on a second. If these records are the main tool for both safety and for getting paid correctly, why would anyone intentionally lie on them?
Economic pressure, pure and simple. Ship owners often staff their vessels at the bare minimum level to cut costs.
Of course.
So when you have fewer people doing the same amount of work, those 14-hour and 72-hour limits become almost impossible to meet during really demanding times, like in heady weather or a busy port call.
The schedule just demands more work than the law allows. And that's where the pressure comes from.
Precisely. And we have the data to back this up. A major survey showed a staggering 64.3% of seafarers admit to actively adjusting or falsifying their hours of work and rest records.
Wow, 64%. So 2 out of every 3 seafarers you talk to are lying on official compliance documents.
Yes. That's not rogue behavior.
No, that's standard operating procedure.
It is. The pressure is both internalized and explicit. Over 60% of seafarers report an expectation from the company or their boss to modify the records. And almost half, 49.1%, said they were explicitly instructed to do it.
Let's make this real. Give me an example of this hidden overtime. Say a vessel is rushing cargo operations in port.
Okay, so during a port turnaround, the entire crew is often on high alert. A deck rating could easily work 16, maybe 17 hours straight in a day just to get the ship out on time.
But the MLC limit is 14 hours.
Right. So the officer in charge looks at the log, he sees 16 hours, and he tells the sir, the law says 14, fix the paperwork.
So the seafarer just changes the official record to show 14 hours. He forfeits 2 or 3 hours of overtime pay, which is just wage theft.
It is wage theft. And more dangerously, the log now officially says he had enough rest when he absolutely did not. The record shows compliance where there was none.
And this is tied directly to the low manning levels you mentioned.
Directly. Ship owners are aiming for operational efficiency, but they're achieving it by forcing seafarers to perform uncompensated hidden work, which masks severe fatigue risk, all just to keep up a superficially efficient schedule.
So you have 2 massive negative consequences here. First, the economic one. Uncompensated overtime is wage theft. It just undermines the entire principle of decent work that the MLC was built on.
And second, the safety one. These prolonged unrecorded work hours lead directly to chronic fatigue, which is a known major contributor to catastrophic maritime accidents, groundings, collisions, you name it.
And if the official records are fake, accident investigators don't even have the real picture of what led up to the disaster.
They have no idea. They're looking at a fantasy.
What's really bizarre is when you contrast the official reports with what the crews are saying. Those port state control reports, the independent backstops, they show these extremely high compliance rates.
Oh yeah, upwards of 90, sometimes 99% compliance.
Meanwhile, when you actually survey the seafarers themselves, they report actual compliance with the work, and rest limits is somewhere between, 11 and 16%?
A dismal 11.7 to 16.1%.
That is a stunning difference. You have an industry reporting nearly perfect compliance, while the people actually doing the work say there's almost none.
It perfectly illustrates what we call the illusion of compliance. The system looks compliant to regulators because the documents are neat, signed, and within the legal limits.
But it's all a fabrication.
It's a fabrication that fundamentally compromises safety management and gives regulators a completely false sense of security.
And it seems like there are even ways for ship owners to sort of technically comply with the letter of the law while still gutting any real overtime pay.
This is a critical loophole in how different countries interpret the rules. Remember, the MLC doesn't mandate a specific overtime rate, just that the calculation has to be transparent.
And that flexibility gets exploited.
It's often interpreted by flag states in a way that prioritizes cutting operational costs.
So what does that look like in an actual contract, in a seafarer's employment agreement?
Well, let's imagine two contracts. In a good scenario, contract A might define standard work as, say, 40 hours a week, and any hours above that, up to the 72-hour limit, are paid at a real premium, maybe 1.5 times the base rate. That's true overtime.
Makes sense.
But under a cost-minimizing interpretation, contract B might define basic pay as covering work all the way up to 72 hours a week, the MLC maximum.
So they just bake it all in.
They bake the hidden overtime into the base pay. They're technically documenting a wage for that time, but they've avoided a true premium entirely. The seafarer gets a flat rate whether they work 45 hours or 72.
So they're paid a single rate for pretty much all legal working time, which makes the whole idea of a premium for overtime almost meaningless.
Exactly. It creates this uneven playing field where a seafarer's right to proper compensation really depends on which flag the ship happens to fly.
It sounds like while the MLC provided the framework, the culture of cost pressure and this institutionalized practice of falsifying records often just renders it an increase in paperwork rather than a real improvement.
That's what many seafarers feel. The fundamental right to be paid for every hour you work is constantly under siege.
So what does this all mean for the future of global shipping? The Maritime Labor Convention gave us the legal scaffolding to secure overtime rights and prevent fatigue, but we have this entrenched industry culture that systematically undermines those goals.
Right. It prioritizes superficial compliance over actual safety and welfare.
And this raises a really important question for the whole system, If fatigue risk management, safety protocols, insurance liabilities, if they all depend on accurate records, and we know that data is systematically and intentionally falsified, how can the global maritime system truly guarantee the safety and well-being of the people who run it? What stands out to you about how regulatory bodies can even begin to close this massive gap between policy and practice?